see this OAuth, but we are using an OC replace. OC replace always takes a little bit of time, so the idea here is to not rush. Take your time. It will take a little bit before you see any result. And I can tell you, I have had so often that I thought, oh boy, this is not going all right. I can't see it coming up. Just give it a minute or two before you are starting to really stress. In the command OC replace, you might be wondering why are we using OC replace and not OC apply? Well, you know, while working with YAML files, there are 3 different ways. You can use OC create, OC apply, OC replace. OC create will create a new resource and will fill if the resource already exists with that name. OC apply is how you can update configuration to a running resource, and OC replace means take out the old resource and start a new resource, and that is really what we need here. And I think for dependency checks, or I don't know what exactly, we should count on this procedure to take about 2 minutes. I'm just going to move forward, and we should see it coming up anytime sooner or later. I do need to say that on previous versions of code-ready containers, I've had my challenges, so this is always the critical moment in the entire procedure of user administration. JD has a question. I'm trying to fill up some time. I'm trying to buy myself some more time here. JD is asking, what is the difference between OC policy and OC ADM policy? Well, JD, it's in the command. OC ADM policy is the administrator level configuration. OC policy is the user level configuration. You use OC policy to create role bindings. You use OC ADM policy to create cluster role bindings. So OC ADM is for specific cluster related, and OC policy is for local based. OC get policy, this is what we are waiting for, DB. Do you see it? I'm just using my OC get pods rs-n OpenShift authentication again. And here we can see that 61 seconds ago, I have a new OAuth pod. In this new OAuth, a new OAuth replica set and a new OAuth pod. That is what I was waiting for. This is the famous Kubernetes zero downtime application update in action. So in order to do a zero downtime application update, you create a new replica set with new properties, and in that new replica set with the new properties, a new pod is started. Wait, did I call this a zero downtime application update? We use OC replace, so then it's not really a zero downtime. There has been some downtime. But at this point, we can continue. OC get users is showing what? Hey, that is weird. It's showing developer and kube admin. Why is that? That is because OC is not very well capable of getting external user identities. So we can see the user identities that I've used in the past. Now if I use OC login -u Anna -p password, then we can see, yay, login successful, and OC get users is showing what? Yeah, that is showing forbidden. That's obvious. And OC get nodes, that is showing forbidden as well. For the simple reason that user Anna is a limited user. But if I'm using OC login -u admin, just for completeness sake, let me push the next slide. OC login -u admin -p password. Then I have good news. I can already see you have access to 72 projects. So that means that we are heading in the right direction. And OC get nodes is showing me the node information. This is the node information in the cluster. And OC get users is showing me the user information. But you can only see the user information for users that have at least logged in once to the cluster. As the user identities are stored externally, OpenShift is not really aware of these users. And that is, again, why, folks, you are getting these confusing messages, user not found. You remember when I use OC ADM policy add cluster role to user cluster admin, we got the user not found on admin. Well, I can tell you, on my first attempt for EX280, I've been looking for at least 10 minutes. What is going on? Nothing is going on. This is expected behavior. Please remember that. You are good to continue. Again, the do or die moment is where you are pushing the new auth configuration to your cluster. That is where you need to see these new pods. And once that is okay, you are good. Okay, now do I need to get back to user, ordinary user? In the slide I'm saying OC login minus U, Anna, and minus P password, and OC get users is showing me nothing, and OC get identity, I think that's also showing me nothing. So I'm just wondering, why am I doing that? Probably because I need to update my slide. Sorry for that. Let's use Control R on admin and help. What am I doing here? OC login minus U admin minus P password. That is what I wanted to do. And let me do this OC get users again and OC get identity again. The identity is just a different way to see the same information. And now we can go for the last part, and the last part of the user-related configuration is where we are going to work with groups. So OC ADM groups minus H. Everybody do really remember this minus H, because here in the minus H there was no need to pipe it through less. You can see everything that's possible. So there's add users, there's new, there is prune, there's remove users, and there is sync. So we can keep it pretty simple. And I would say start by using OC ADM groups new to create the new group. So developers, that will create a group with the name developers. And then you use OC ADM groups, add users, developers, Anouk, to add the new user, to add the user to this new group. And OC ADM groups, new testers. And then we add users again. So to testers, we are going to add user Lida. Hey, that is interesting. You can see it's lying to me. It's telling me group user OpenShift testers added Lida. No, I don't have a user Lida. But OpenShift doesn't know, because it's fetching these identities from the outside. So you really need to be careful, and you really need to check and double check. This is really something where on the exam, I would advise you double check every single command that you have typed to make sure that you did not make any typos, because the command line interface is not going to help you at all if you make typos. And hey, now back to how do we deal with this on the exam. Here we go, creating an HT Passwd file using Linux. I am back in the OpenShift documentation. It's the authentication guide. Again, folks, on the exam, you will have PDFs to the different books in the documentation. So you need to know which book you need to be in. And you need to be in the authentication guide, where you can find creating an HT Passwd file. So here we have the HT Passwd command. If you scroll down, what do we get? Oh, we even get create an HT Passwd file using Windows. Oh, wow, using Windows. Then it's showing you how to create this, this secret. And then it is showing you the sample HT Passwd custom resource. What is this? Kind O auth with the spec identity provider. And hey, this is the spec that we needed, right? So in our procedure, we had this identity provider, that already was using an HTTPS WD identity provider. On the exam, you will not have an identity provider that's already configured. In spec, you will see nothing, but this will make it easy. And then you can see OC apply -F. Hey, that's funny. On previous versions of the documentation, it was OC replace, and now they have made it OC apply. But hey, the result is the same. And then you can use your OC login, and if you want to, OC who am I? And that is basically it. So what does it mean? It means that my procedure that is over 3 different slides is also in the documentation. And this is one of the examples where you will easily get around in the documentation. Just for your information, here on the left, you can see that we have these other identity providers as well, like LDAP and GitHub and GitLab and Google and OpenID and whatever you can imagine. I think for now, we have talked enough about this topic, and we have our users up and running. Now, the next thing is, what are we going to do with these users? And that is where role-based access control is kicking in. RBAC. So I'm going to make a start with RBAC already. Folks, just as a side note, and that's also to you, Derek, based on where we are right now, we are going pretty smooth. I'm running ahead a little bit, and I'm expecting that we might be finishing earlier. That might be half an hour earlier. We will see. Let's make a start with role-based access control. Now, what is the purpose of role-based access control? That is to connect users to specific roles. Roles either have a project or a cluster scope. That's the important thing to remember. So are we going to apply the role to the entire cluster or just to a project? There are different types of users available in role-based access control. And users are created as a specific user type and are granted access to cluster resources using role bindings. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we need to understand what a role is all about. So a role is a set of rules that consist of verbs, and users and groups can be associated to multiple roles. This isn't only something that you will find in OpenShift. The concept of using a role-based access control in this way is pretty widespread. Now, verbs are specific permissions such as view and edit and many more. And the idea is that you use these verbs in a role to bring the permissions closer to daily tasks. The role binding is what connects users and groups to a role. And you can use OC ADM policy for cluster level roles, or project roles as administrator, or OC policy to assign project roles as any user with sufficient access to roles. So there are 2 interfaces. OC policy is the non-admin. OC ADM policy is the cluster admin. Now, first thing that you need to do, you need to figure out which roles exist. And how do you do that? Well, let me demonstrate. OC get cluster roles. And this is giving me all the cluster roles. Oh boy, there are so many. How many? 219. You want to make it a little bit more readable. I would suggest use grep-v to filter out some stuff that you don't want to see. So with the grep-v on system column, you'll see it's becoming a bit more readable. And maybe you want to filter it down a little bit more. Maybe this is enough. It really depends on what you want to do. I hope you'll be able to pick out the more obvious, like admin and basic user and edit. And there should be some more. What else? The view is a common one. And these are the most common ones. That's how you can pick up these different roles. If you want to see what the roles are doing, you can use OC describe cluster roles. So OC describe cluster roles on a specific role. Let's do an OC describe cluster roles. So roles sudoer. So what is that? Well, there we can see the resources. So the resources are API resources, and the resource names and the verbs. So this is allowing impersonate to all of these internal system roles. So let me do that on view as well. And there we can see, oh, that's a long list of resources, probably most of the resources. And the verbs are get, list, and watch. Do we need to get down on this level? I don't think so. I don't think you need to go all the way down, but it's nice to see that you can assign, that you can get more information out of it. And do remember, the authentication and authorization user guide is the location where you want to go to for more explanation. I'm back on the slide. JD has a question. JD is asking, if I need to assign a role to a user on a specific namespace, should I use OCADM policy? JD, OCADM policy works for root as well as non-root. Sorry, did I say root? I'm a Linux dude. Sorry for making that mistake. OCADM policy works for cluster admin as well as ordinary users. I would say just use OCADM policy, but use OCADM policy to create a role binding and not a cluster role binding. That's probably the best thing to do. Good, let's talk about the roles. So there's a couple of roles that are commonly used by administrators. You can learn how to filter on the roles. You can also try to memorize this handful of common roles. There's cluster admin. Cluster admin is full control over cluster resources. Cluster admin has a cluster scope, so it applies to the entire cluster. There is admin, which is full control over project resources, and that has a project scope. So if you want to make a user administrator for a specific project, you are not going to use cluster admin, you are going to use admin, because here it is the role that determines the scope. So don't use admin to create a cluster administrator, and don't do it the other way around. Edit and view, well, that should be obvious enough. Basic user, which is user read access to cluster or project. It's basic user, basic access. And we have self-provisioner, which is where users can create new projects in the cluster, which has cluster scope only. If you were in the EX280 class yesterday, do you remember that I was using OC new project in the OpenShift sandbox? And in the OpenShift sandbox, I got an error message because the user was not allowed to do OC new project. Well, that is because self-provisioner is lacking in the OpenShift sandbox. So users can't create new projects. That's an administrator task. Everything is configurable. We have already seen OC describe cluster roles, which is showing you what is exactly in the roles, and roles are listed in alphabetical order. Right, let's continue with the next bit, which is setting cluster or local roles. So OCADM policy allows you to set a role as cluster administrator on any project. And OC policy allows you to set a role as administrator on specific projects. And to figure out who can do what, OCADM policy, who can delete user or whatever, is also convenient. So OCADM policy, who can, is a quick check of who can do what. Instead of using who can, which you might also consider as just another command that you need to remember the syntax of, you can of course also authenticate as a user and see if it works. Then the cluster role bindings and the role bindings. What is going on here? Well, a role binding is a connection of a user to a role. A cluster role binding is a connection of a user or a group, if you want to a cluster role. So if you use OC get cluster role bindings, then what is it giving us? And that's giving us a lot of stuff. WC 185 lines. I'm not so sure how convenient it is to work on 185 lines. I mean, most of this stuff is part of your operating system and might not be very useful. Now, how about OC get role bindings? This is showing something that is a little bit more readable. It's not for it's for ordinary role bindings. OC get role bindings is most useful to get an overview of current roles and associated users for this specific project. And if you want to see a role bindings for all, OC get role bindings -A, which again is giving you a lot. Now, how are you going to use commands like this? I think that on the exam, you are going to use users and groups. You are going to create role bindings and cluster role bindings. So if you have created a user with the name Bob, and you want to see role bindings for user Bob, I would say use this wisely, as in OC get role bindings -A, pipe grab Bob. That will filter out all the role bindings that apply to user Bob or to user admin. User admin is a bad choice because there is so much going on for user admin. But if you have created specific users, which you are going to do, then this is going to tell you which role bindings exist for these specific users. And that allows you to verify this kind of stuff. All right, I am going to show you the demo, and I want to do that before our long break, so that you have something to play with during the break if you want to experiment for yourself. Good, bug alert. I've been in trouble in this demo when I was recently doing it. That was on OpenShift 4.9.15. Now, let's just see how well we are doing today. OC, who am I? I'm admin, that's good. And I am using OC get cluster role binding. -O white, pipe grab, self-provisioner. What is a self-provisioner? Well, the self-provisioner is the difference between code-ready containers and the OpenShift sandbox. It allows users to create projects. Let me use OC describe cluster role binding on self-provisioners, so that we can see what is going on and what is inside. So the subject is system authenticated OAuth. So the default configuration is that if you are part of the system and you are authenticated through OAuth, then you get access to this self-provisioner role. So next we are going to delete the self-provisioner role. And let's use that. Let's do that using OC ADM policy. Remove cluster role binding. Hang on. Remove cluster role. What did I write here? Cluster role. Cluster role from group. Self-provisioner. And we are going to remove that from system authenticated OAuth. And what is it telling me? It's telling me your changes may get lost whenever a master is restarted unless you want to prevent reconciliation. Yeah, that's because of bigger cluster environments. That's something that we can safely ignore. Now I'm going to use OC describe cluster role bindings self-provisioners. What are we getting? We are getting not found. Good. Now I'm going to log in as previously created user Linda. So OC login minus U Linda minus P password. And you see the message. The message now is you don't have any projects. Contact your system administrator to request a project. When we still had this cluster role binding, the message was use OC new project blah blah. But we don't have the OC new project blah blah message, and that is because of what we have just done. Now I am going back to my admin shell. So OC login minus U admin minus P password. And I'm going to use OC new project RBAC. And next I'm going to use OC policy. Let me push the right slide so that you can easily follow along if you want to. And let me show you all of this. So OC policy, add role to user, Linda. Add role to user admin, Linda, minus N, RBAC. Which is doing what? Well, this is making sure that user Linda has admin privileges on the RBAC project. Next, OC get groups is showing me what? Showing me developers and testers with the respective group members. And next, I am going to do what? Well, on the slide, you can see login as admin to use the admin role. But hey, shall we first login as Linda? OC login minus U Linda minus P password. And there we can see you have one project on this server RBAC and using project RBAC. So here we have user Linda, who is admin for the role for the project RBAC. And what does that mean? Can Linda, for example, use OC policy, add role to user, edit Lisa? And there we can see the authorization was added. And why is that? Well, that is because user Linda is currently in the role RBAC. So this admin role really means that user Linda can do whatever user Linda wants to do on the RBAC project. So I don't have to be logging in as the admin user. I can do this as user Linda as well. So can we do this? OC policy add role to. Why do I use add role to user? Let's make it add role to group. Edit developers and add role to group. View on testers. And that is something that user Linda can easily do. And if we use OC get role bindings. Role bindings minus O white is giving you a little bit more details. Then we get the current role bindings that have been created. So the cluster role admin, and here we can see the edit that Linda has just added, and we can see the view. We can also see a couple of internal role bindings. That is not what matters here. What matters is that we have successfully created user Linda as an administrator.